Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Major Lee Buckingham. We are honoured to acknowledge members of the Royal Australian Armoured Corps who are joining us this evening. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial and students on behalf of the following schools. From Victoria, South Yarra Primary School, Wonga Park Primary School, and Yakandanda Primary School. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Students, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the hearts of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Flight Sergeant Jack Stacey. Jack Stacey was born on the 6th of December 1924 in Alstonville in the Northern Rivers region of northern New South Wales. He was the son of Benjamin and May Stacey, and having finished his schooling, was working as a clerk. On the 30th of January 1943, barely a month after turning 18, Stacey enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force. He began training as a wireless operator and air gunner. After completing his initial training in Australia, he embarked for overseas service. As part of the Empire Air Training Scheme, he was one of almost 27,500 Royal Australian Air Force pilots, navigators, wireless operators, gunners and engineers who throughout the course of the war joined Royal Air Force squadrons or Australian squadrons based in Britain. Arriving in Britain, Stacey undertook further training before he was posted to number 460 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force. Number 460 Squadron would become the most highly decorated Australian squadron in Bomber Command and the squadron that suffered the highest casualties. Flying twin-engined Vickers Wellington medium bombers and then four-engined Avro Lancaster heavy bombers, the squadron lost over 1,000 men, Australian, British, Canadians, New Zealanders and South Africans. Almost 600 Australians from 460 Squadron are listed here on the Roll of Honour. On the morning of the 19th of March 1945, 22 Lancasters from 460 Squadron took part in a raid on Hanau, Germany. Returning from the mission, low cloud cover reduced visibility over the home airfields of the Bomber Command squadrons in Lancashire, England. The Lancaster, in which Stacey was the wireless operator and air gunner, was being homed to the Royal Air Force Kirsten Airfield, a few kilometres from 460 Squadron's home at Binbrook, when it crashed into high ground while making its approach towards the runway. Stacey and all 6 of his fellow crewmates were killed. Pilot Officer Jeffrey Brown, Flight Sergeant Llewellyn Grant, Warrant Officer George McBride, Warrant Officer Alexander Moss, Flight Sergeant Rex Shode, and Sergeant Jack David. The Australian members of the crew were recovered from the crash and buried side by side in the Royal Air Force plot at Cambridge City Cemetery. Jack Stacey was 20 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left amongst almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Flight Sergeant Jack Stacey. He gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall not grow old as we who are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, had thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that concludes the last post ceremony. Thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you all a very good evening.